Bore da, mae'n hyfryd fod gyda chi unwaith eto ar Fore Dydd Mawrth. Good morning, it's lovely to be with you once again on this Tuesday morning. And I'm joined today by Canon Sian Jones, who is the local ministry area dean of Ordained in St David's Diocese. And we're going to be talking a little bit about ministry, as this week the women priests in the Church in Wales are celebrating, well, I hope more than just the women celebrating, everybody's celebrating 25 years of the ministry of women priests in the Church in Wales. So Sian and I will be talking a little bit about how ministry has been for us. But before we do that, I'd just like to make one announcement, and that is that tomorrow evening there's going to be a special service on the anniversary of my ordination to the priesthood. And it will be taking place at 7 p.m. via Zoom. So if you want the Zoom link, please leave us a message and we can get Envis to send it out to you. And then you can join in the service. So it won't be on Facebook, but it will be on Zoom, and you're very welcome to join in. Sian has chosen a reading today, so I'm going to read it to you now. And it comes from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13. It's a very familiar passage. Many of you will have heard it perhaps being read at weddings, and it talks about the qualities of love. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. That's a beautiful reading. Thank you, Sian. And lots for us to remember in it and put into practice. Well, today is the 25th anniversary of your ordination as priest in St David's Cathedral. So congratulations and best wishes. What are your memories of that day? What was it like to be one of the first women to be ordained priest in the Church in Wales?
Well, the first memory I have is that it was incredibly snowy, incredibly cold, wet and foggy. And I think that poses a great contrast to what was felt. That was the outside of the cathedral. On the inside of the cathedral, we had a complete contrast in that it was warm, it was joyous, it was a day of celebration. It had been a long journey, and there had been disappointments along the way, frustrations perhaps on the way, and struggles on the way. But nevertheless, I think despite all that sort of negativity, um, I believe that strengthened my ministry in the longer term. And I think it gave me a greater resolve and also a deepening faith, actually. So that whatever circumstances I'd face thereafter in the course of ministry, then I felt better equipped to probably deal with that.
That's very interesting. That's very good. I remember it being very cold in Brecon too when I was ordained.
You couldn't see a thing. It was literally in the fog.
Yes, yes. Because I suppose most ordinations take place in the summer, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
And so to be ordained in January was a little bit different for
And
us.
we came out actually into the dark, which was
Oh, no.
even more strange. But nevertheless, there was a great sense of light and joy inside, and
Yeah.
and a day of celebration.
Lovely, lovely. 25 years on, we tend to forget that the first women to be ordained priests were to some extent pioneers. What challenges did you face in the early days? Did most people accept your ministry?
I was incredibly lucky. I had laity who certainly supported me to the hilt, without exception, actually. And I felt very upheld by them, and I'm very grateful for that. There were obviously clergy, sadly, who couldn't come to terms with something that was new, although some did eventually get to that point where they did accept, but there were one or two who could not accept. And I always remember I had to go to a baptism, and it was a friend's child that I was the godmother to, and it was in England actually. And I was also deaconing for the Eucharist because the father was a priest. And I was in the vestry beforehand with a lot of other priests, and one said, "Oh, well, I wish if they want to be ordained, I wish they would dress properly." And I was so stupid, I didn't realize they were talking about me as I had my back to them. And it was in the days where obviously the diaconate stole was worn across your chest, fastened on the right, came over your left shoulder. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I suddenly realized it was to myself he was referring. So I turned around and I said, "Well, that's very strange you should say that." I said, "But I was in St. David's Cathedral on the Saturday, which was for the diaconate." And I said, "That's how the Dean of St. David's Cathedral placed it on me. So maybe you should take issue with him." And with that, the whole vestry just burst into laughter. And I think that's really how I've dealt in ministry with challenge, is always had that sense of humor, rather than become aggressive or whatever. And I think that's why I chose that reading, really, is that no matter what our differences are, love should lie at the heart of all things. And one can be gentle, but firm as well.
Yes, yes, that's very true. Yes. And it's so important to keep that sense of humor, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yes.
I think it's laid at the heart of most of my ministry, really.
Yeah, yeah. Sian, over the years, you've ministered in many different places and churches. So would you like to share with us some of the things that stand out in your memory, things that have brought you joy during your ministry?
I think big thing that's brought me a sense of joy, and there's certainly been a sense of privilege, have been the people that I've met. The amazing trust that parishioners have in allowing you into their home and sharing in the most intimate moments of their lives. And I think there isn't anything else actually in terms of a career, if you want to use that word, which I don't, but nevertheless, there's nothing else that compares to that, because you're sharing with them in the most intimate moments of life, and difficult moments of life, and joyous moments of life, and it is a true privilege. Equally, I would say it's been a privilege too, meeting those individuals who perhaps are on their journey and are still looking. And again, it's been a privilege to be part of that journey, part of their questions, part of the challenges that they throw up to you. And I was reminded of such a challenge the other day. A dear friend of mine died, and her son and I were arranging the funeral. And he said to me, "Do you remember when I was in your confirmation class?" And I thought, well, that's a long time ago, because you're now a dad yourself. And he said, "I'll never forget it," he said, "because I didn't want to be there." His mother had sent him along. And I said, "Right." And he said, "And I challenged you with a question." And he said, "And do you know, you didn't fob me off. And although," he said, "you just admitted the fact that sometimes we don't know everything." And he said, from there on, I thought, and he continued with his journey, and he's still on that journey. So I think little moments like that are true gems, actually. And that's a very, very long time ago. Because as I said, he's a grown man now, which makes me feel very old.
Yes, it's often those little things in ministry that stand out for us, isn't it? That we remember.
Yeah.
And those encounters with individual people.
And you never know the impact that you've had, which I find quite remarkable, really.
Yes, that's true.
You never see the end result very often.
No, you don't. No, that's very true. But I suppose we just have to carry on and be faithful in our ministry.
Absolutely.
And leave it up to God, isn't it?
I think that's the essence of it.
Yeah.
And God will take whatever is on offer and hopefully will use it to his glory. And that's what we're about, really.
Definitely. Sian, you also serve as one of the canons of St. David's Cathedral. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what your role involves and what it means to you to be part of the cathedral team?
Well, St. David's Cathedral has always had a special place in my heart because I was brought up in Dinas Cross, which was just up the road from the cathedral. And so from when I was a child, I used to go down there because, being a historian as well, it wasn't just the religious aspect, it was the historical aspect of the place. And it always seemed to me that the stones were steeped in history, but equal in spirituality. I was made a canon in 2009, and then I was made canon treasurer a few years ago. And as a canon, one's a trustee of the cathedral as part of the chapter. And that means that basically you help the dean and assist the dean and all the staff there in overseeing and running the cathedral in terms of its spirituality, in terms of its administration, and pastorally. As canon treasurer, it's by definition the senior canon. It shows how old I am, that I've lasted this long. And it means that, in effect, when there's no dean, it falls to myself to install the deans. I did install the dean, actually, but I installed the canons as well. So I had a great privilege when I was made canon treasurer, because as it happened, there were several canons to put in before the new dean arrived, and then I was part of the dean's service as well. So that was quite something. Likewise, the Canon Treasury is part of the finance team as a subcommittee who do a lot of the scrutiny of the budgets and so on. And then they report back to the chapter meeting, who then have the final say. So yeah, that's one aspect of it. And of course, the other aspect is we go to the cathedral for 3 weeks or 3 Sundays or whatever, which is equivalent of about 2.5 weeks, really. And you're immersed in the culture of the cathedral then, in terms of its worship, preaching, pastoral, meeting and greeting. And I think I'm the canon to dogs, because I usually end up holding the dogs outside the cathedral in order to allow people to go into the cathedral. So that seems to be my everlasting role, I think, as canon treasurer or anything else. I usually minister to those with dog collars like myself, but they've got 4 legs, not 2.
Oh, that's lovely. And it gives you a different dimension to your ministry, doesn't it then?
Certainly
You
does.
have the cathedral side as well as life in the ministry area.
Yeah. And I think as well, it gives you an opportunity. It's almost a retreat for you.
Right.
Because obviously there are other people leading worship and you can immerse yourself in the worship, which is great. And also the music is a delight as well.
Yes, yes, of course. Lovely. Looking back over your years of service, the Church in Wales and the Diocese of St David's have gone through many changes, particularly in recent years with the development of ministry areas. How have you been able to adapt to this? And what do you think we should be focusing on as we look towards the future?
I think change is a part of life, really. Nothing ever stays the same forever, and neither should it. And throughout my ministry, I think it's about giving one's best in the circumstances that one finds oneself in. I think from the point of view of involving the laity and affirming their value within the church community, I think LMAs and the nature of LMAs are a good thing. And I think we need to value the contribution of our laity and should have done perhaps a lot sooner, rather than be focused totally on priestly ministry. I think also it's about identifying those gifts which people have and utilizing them, and also giving them the confidence to be built up to use them. Because a lot of things in life involve confidence, and sometimes people hold back. Ministry can be a challenge in LMAs, as in any other aspect of ministry. I think one of the challenges perhaps which we face currently is allowing people to gain that trust, that they are on a journey of discovery. And perhaps it's difficult because there's an urgency about this journey. But there again, if you rush it, you lose that affirming trust that is necessary. I think it takes time. I hope that we have that time in order to build a very firm foundation, because to me, if we get the foundation right, then the rest will actually follow on much easier.
Yes.
If we get the foundation wrong, then unfortunately it starts disjointing and falling apart. And that's something which I think we as LMA deans are going to have to be very mindful of. My other concern perhaps is that we nurture people to be given a given role, but obviously that role is a temporary role in many ways, because there's always a cut-off point where people move on or want to do something different or feel they've done enough, which is only fair. And I think that continuity is something which is going to challenge us in the longer term. And we're going to have to be mindful of that, so that any transition will be a smooth transition, as opposed to something which is, again, fragmented, because that, in a sense, can only do harm to what is a very good concept in many ways, although it's certainly a different concept to the one that we're used to.
Yes. Ministry now is very different to what it was 25 years ago when we first began, isn't it, Sean?
It is. But I think people are the same.
Yes, that's true.
And nurturing people is the same. And building people up is the same. And I think if we put our people at the heart of it, with faith and God's help and prayer, then it might take longer, but I think it will be more secure and more solid.
Yes, I think that's very wise, Sean. Yeah.
Well, that's my opinion. I mean, others might have a different opinion, and I value that, but that's just me.
Yes.
Really.
No,
Yeah.
That's very good. We sometimes forget that we're role models for the generations which come after us. So what would you say to someone who's considering whether God is calling them to the ordained ministry today?
I think the first thing to say is that be yourself in your calling. And in being yourself, listen to that inner still voice, which taps you in a sense in your heart, but also hits you on the head. And no matter how much you feel you're resistant to that idea, explore it with prayer, explore it with perhaps people who you value and trust. Talk it through and reflect. Sometimes we think we know what's best for ourselves. I remember I was made children's officer by Bishop Iver, and I thought it was the most hilarious role that anybody could have ever given me, because I remember in college I said, I will never work with children and animals. Ironically, I worked as a children's officer and enjoyed it, but equally I used to have animal services when I was in San Stefan and things. So you never know in ministry. I think you have to be open to what God brings, and go with that flow, really. But be yourself in it, and don't try and become whatever a priest is. God will use you as you are. You don't have to be anything else. And it's a long, hard lesson, actually, because I used to think I had to be very good at meditation, because I'm a bit of a natterbox. That wasn't the easiest thing for me. And then I suddenly realized, well, no, my friend was very good at long periods of silence, but there again, she wasn't very good, perhaps, at engaging in a different way. And I thought, God uses our gifts in all different shapes and sizes and forms. So that would be my recommendation to anyone considering ordination. Let God use you as you are.
Thank you, Sean. That's very true, I think. And sometimes we think that we have to be a certain person or behave in a certain way or do everything that we see other people doing around us, but it's not always true, is it? No. We have to be the person that God has called us to be, that individual person, the individual gifts God has given us.
I remember reading Pope Francis saying, the Lord's call is not an intrusion of God in our freedom. It's not a cage or a burden to be borne. On the contrary, it is the loving initiative whereby God encounters us and invites us to be part of a great undertaking. He opens before our eyes the horizon of a greater sea and an abundant catch.
That's lovely.
And I think that's basically what it is. It's allowing God to encounter us and just trusting him, put our hand in his.
Definitely. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Would you like to finish with a prayer?
Certainly. One of the prayers which I've treasured throughout ministry, really, is the prayer of Reinhold Niebuhr, called the Prayer of Serenity. And I think for any potential priest, it's not a bad one, really, to have. God gives me grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things that I can, the wisdom, give me the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sian.
Well, thank you for having me.
And you've chosen a hymn as well, which we're going to have now at the end. And I think it fits in very well, actually, with what we've been talking about today, because the words are just as I am, and God takes us just as we are and uses us in his service. So I'm going to share my screen now, so just bear with me. Well, thank you very much, Sian, for speaking with me this morning. And it's been lovely to hear your thoughts on ministry today. And once again, congratulations as you celebrate the 25th anniversary of your ordination to the priesthood, and every blessing for your ministry, both in the ministry area and also in the cathedral. Thank you, Sian. And thank you everybody for watching this morning. Diolch yn fawr I chi I gyd am wylio y bore yma. Pob bendith I chi I gyd. Every blessing to you all.